Welcome to Human Risk, a podcast dedicated to the understanding of human behaviour as a risk. Here's your host, Christian Hunt.
Hello and welcome back to the Human Risk podcast. And if you heard the last episode, welcome back to my voice post-COVID. On this episode, I'm speaking to a podcaster and author who's just published a book detailing his investigation into one of the biggest scams in history. Jamie Bartlett is the author of The Missing Cryptoqueen, the tale of his multi-year investigation into the disappearance of Dr Ruja Ignatova, founder of OneCoin, a cryptocurrency that sold itself as an alternative to Bitcoin, but was instead a pyramid-style scam which relieved people from 175 countries of at least £4 billion, and possibly up to 12. If you've heard the BBC podcast, The Missing Cryptoqueen, then you'll be familiar with Jamie's work. If not, stand by to be astonished. What you're about to hear is a human risk tale like no other. It's got poor decision-making written all over it. In our conversation, Jamie explains how the OneCoin scam worked, how he came across the story, and what happened when he began to investigate it. This is an amazing tale, told in an incredibly engaging and human way. Whether you're a crypto advocate or skeptic, or you don't even know what cryptocurrencies really are, what Jamie has to say is worth hearing. Particularly if you've invested in cryptocurrencies, are thinking of doing so, or if your job involves preventing scams or financial crime. Before we get on to the Missing Cryptoqueen, Jamie and I begin our discussion by exploring his early research into the dark net, and he gives me some thoughts on how technology impacts our decision-making. He's got some fascinating ideas to share. So please enjoy, as I know you will, my conversation with Jamie Bartlett on The Missing Cryptoqueen. Jamie, welcome to the Human Risk podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited. And before we dive into the subject that I desperately want to talk about, which is The Missing Cryptoqueen, I'm fascinated by your broader book of work. And you seem to be someone that is very interested in exploring tech and what it does to us. What was it that got you started looking at that space?
I was never really interested in the tech. I find it all a bit tedious in a way because, like, my dad was a computer programmer really early on, and he had this IBM mainframe computer in our house, in his home study. It took up a whole room, cost more than the house. And I hated it. He used to print out, it was like a mechanism of control. He used to print out all the chores we had to do on this massive computer. So I hated computers. To me, they were just a way of controlling the children, and I couldn't stand it. But I was more interested in, like, I got really fascinated by how weird groups seem to be using the internet. Back in like 2007, 2008, I started working for this think tank. Didn't really know what think tank was when I joined, but I just joined anyway because I was looking for a job. And I was especially interested in the English Defence League. Don't know if you remember those guys. The sort of Tommy Robinson,
Yes,
going around football fans, chanting stuff.
I'll put a link to them in the show notes for overseas listeners or people that either were too young to have heard of them or don't remember.
God, too young to have heard of them, eh? God, it feels like yesterday, but it was like a radical right-wing street movement, basically, led by this guy called Tommy Robinson. And everyone was writing about them chanting on the streets and causing trouble, getting into fights. But I was looking on Facebook, and I just saw there's 20 times more of them on Facebook. That's where they're doing everything. That's their hub of activity. It's how they organize. It's how they recruit. It's how they push their propaganda. And no one seemed to be looking at that side of things. So I was like, something big's going on here. Like, fringe groups are really good at finding the opportunities that new technology brings. And so do you know how Facebook allows companies to target people with personalized adverts? We all know that now. But back in 2008, 2009, people didn't really know how it all worked. And I thought, why don't I set up an online survey and I'll target people who are members of the English Defence League and ask them to fill in my questionnaire. I just thought, it's not going to work, but who cares? I'll give it a go. Put £200 in the budget. And I came back over the weekend and like 1,000 members of the EDL had filled in my survey and no one had ever done it before. And I was like, oh my God. So this whole strange internet world that we're now also familiar seemed like an amazing place to understand how the world was changing and how groups were using the internet to change what they did. And it kind of spiraled from there. I just got more and more into it. I started becoming obsessed with the idea that there's all these strange groups you'd never ever be able to reach, you'd never meet, you'd never even know existed. You can now just go online and find them and talk to them. And for me, that was just so interesting. And I felt like it was a kind of a new area. And so I started writing about the dark net. I bought drugs on the dark net and wrote a book about all of that and how it worked, and eating disorder forums and neo-Nazi groups, trolling groups, all these weird places. I wanted people to understand them because I felt like most of the media was always exaggerating it or, monstering these people, or they weren't even trying to get into it. But I wanted to just show people how the world online was really working in these dark corners. Because it's like the monster under the bed when you shine the torch is never as scary as you think often. Although maybe I was wrong to say that given what's happened since. But that's how it all started. And I just became like, how you can get pigeonholed in a way? I became the guy who studies weird things on the internet. But I like that. I thought that was a really cool place to be.
I've heard you talk about the way that we respond to algorithms as having almost religious attributes. And I really wanted to make sure we cover that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it just seems like so much of our lives has become determined and controlled and shaped by these powerful forces, these all-knowing powerful forces that we really don't fully understand ourselves, but decide where we eat, where we travel to, what holidays we go on, what books we read, who we fall in love with, what political parties we vote for, what information we see. But it's like this magical, mysterious thing that does all that we don't understand. And I grew up as a Catholic, and I was like, you know what? It sort of reminds me of, when the old, like back in the day, it was only the bishops that were allowed to speak the language of the Bible. And that's a bit like programmers in Silicon Valley. They're the only ones who really know how this works, and you shall never understand it. I was like, God, it reminds me of going to Catholic school and going to Catholic church, where it was all about mystery and powerful people up there that understood the secrets, but that you just had to follow the rules, but that controls and shapes your life. And I just thought the amount of time we spend on it, the amount of time we touch our phone as well. I don't know if you ever have seen the studies that, like, not only is it the first thing that everyone touches, I don't know if that's true for you, like
Totally.
first thing you grab, the last thing you touch. I think one day we'll want to be buried with our phones. That's how important they were to us. Why not? I mean, in Egyptian times, people were buried with things that meant something to them. So it just started to feel like it had a bit of a sort of a religious. So there were some similarities with organized religion, but also the more powerful these algorithms become, the more they seem all-knowing. They understand us better than we understand ourselves. Religion is the only other thing where you have this all-powerful God up there that knows you better, that understands your secrets, that you just have to kind of worship. And as computers and machines get more powerful, I think that dynamic will play out even more. And it really was triggered for me when I heard a story that it actually makes me shiver. I hate it. This Uber driver in conversation with someone in the back who said, have you had a good day? Have you had a good day today? And he says, yes, the algorithm has been good to me today. And I was like, oh my God. But it would be true. Like, did you land the
Right. Makes perfect sense, but it's insane.
Did you land the right ride? Did you get lucky with which job was offered to you at a certain time? And it's like, but that's true. The other day, Amazon just decided that it was going to reduce the price of my book. And I sell loads of copies. It's like, thank you, algorithm, for bestowing your munificence upon me. So it's like, it's a religion.
Which is astonishing, right? Because you would think, well, 21st century, we're smart. Because a religion, you can sort of say, well, it was created at a time when people, weren't educated. And yet what we've got nowadays is we're more educated than ever before. In theory, we have the greater capability to challenge these things. And yet it's having exactly the same impact.
Mm. Yeah, because religion isn't always about education levels as well. It's a sort of desire for, I think a lot of us have a desire to believe there's something up there powerful, stronger and more knowledgeable than we are. And when we see that, we're going to, some of us anyway, are going to want to sort of just slavishly follow it. But it's not a religion in the sense that we believe it's not religion in the sense that we would attribute it to the origins of life or the ultimate purpose of life, but a religion in the sense of the rituals that go with religion, the rituals that we've always done as humans, whereby we will go through certain things, offer up goods, offer up our prayers and our hopes to this powerful thing that controls our lives that we don't really understand. And I think that's the thing. I genuinely can imagine so many of us in the future will be organizing our life around an algorithm. We'll be thinking, okay, like I want to land we do it already. I want to land the best date on whatever website it is. I need to know, how do I get my profile picture perfectly attuned, not to the person, to the algorithm that's going to put me to the person I want. But there's workshops already where it's like, SEO, search engine optimization is an example. So, okay, to use the word religion is a bit flippant. And there will probably be religions that are literally about worshipping artificial intelligence, if ever achieves like sort of general sort of sentience. And we'll just be like, you know what, I'm just going to worship it because it seems to know more about me than I do. But I think it's probably more about rituals, powerful forces, and how we live our lives according to things we don't understand. And we sort of become beholden to it and start acting accordingly.
And I agree with you. On the one hand, it sounds really extreme, but you're right in the sense of the power that it has over us and people's willingness to bend to it and to let it do things that you wouldn't let other human beings do. You know, if you're in a situation where, I mean, sure, there are abusive relationships, but if you had a human being that was controlling you to that extent, that you were that supplicant to it, in a democratic society, the majority, at least people would go, well, I'm not putting up with that. But we seem to allow it in because it comes cloaked as technology, the box, if you like, that we don't really understand.
Well, like religion, it seems to offer us so many benefits as well. I mean, obviously, I don't know if you've had this, but if you ever try and drive anywhere without Google Maps, I'm just completely lost.
Totally.
I don't know where I am. And if it disappeared tomorrow, any little bit of spatial awareness I once had has now gone as well, because I'm so reliant on the box that I don't know where I'm going. I've followed Google Maps to the point where I'm driving down these like dark, but I have no idea where I'm going, but I'm just following it. I followed it on my bicycle the other day. Well, I nearly went into a river. I was just like, I didn't know where I was. And it was pitch black. I was just following, there were no lights. I was in a field. And I was like, I'm just doing what it tells me. I'm an idiot.
Right.
But I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't navigate myself anymore. And it's the benefits that it gives you. And I mean, there's a wider thing as well. We've become so used to convenience and speed that we're just ever more dependent upon it. So the technology, you know, that famous phrase of like, we shape our technology and thereafter our technology shapes us. I think Winston Churchill said it about architecture. And that's definitely true. Like the technology shaped us to become dependent and reliant on speed and ease and convenience and total connectivity, that we now can't really live without it. I was perfectly happy 20 years ago wandering around without a phone.
Right.
But now it's become so embedded in my life, I would really struggle. Do you reach for your pocket because you can feel that phantom buzzing, and then you realize your phone's not there at all, but it's your body's wanting to give you that thrill of
But it's fascinating, right? Because you walk out without your phone. I mean, I freaked out, firstly because I start off assuming that it's been stolen. But then you kind of, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to get anywhere? And in some cases, that's entirely valid, because if you haven't got your wallet because you're used to using Apple Pay or Google Pay, then you genuinely are stranded in that sense. But you're right, it's the navigation piece.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the idea of.
But apply the navigation thing to just decision making. Where do I go on holiday? Where do I eat my food? And ultimately, who do I vote for politically? How do I form my political views? I mean, all those things you'd feel a bit lost if you weren't constantly looking online. What are other people saying about this? I've got to probably agree with them or not agree with them, or what sort of, because the problem is you don't 20 years ago, you would have known what other people were receiving as part of their political diet. You might not have read all the newspapers, but you had a broad sense of what was out there. But now everyone gets their own totally personalized version of information. So everyone has legitimately radically different views about what's going on in the world. And then we sort of struggle to be able to communicate with each other because we're coming from such different perspectives. We don't even know what other people have consumed and how they've seen it, who they're seeing. And so it's not, I always use that Google example as the simplest one that everyone gets. But then I sort of say, now apply it to how you see the world and your information diet.
Right. I love that quote on architecture, because tech has been designed in a way to appeal to humans, and it plays on our instincts. And so it gives us what we are naturally looking for.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of, in a way, it's like clever people designing something that then, I'm almost always struck by sort of, if you take something like social media, at its core, I can concoct a very simple argument, whether it's LinkedIn, which is great for business networking, Facebook, staying in touch with people that live in different countries. There's a really positive thing there, but it very quickly gets subverted, in part because I don't necessarily think we have the right custodians for it, but I'm not sure who would be. But there's something interesting about it. Does play to our base instincts, and that's why it gets where we're at. So
Totally.
tech, on the one hand, we think of tech as being not very human. On the other hand, it really, the people programming what it does, incredibly human.
Yeah, but exactly. I think social media is when I talk about like media literacy, sometimes you might think it's just about understanding Google and just about understanding how an algorithm works or how Facebook presents you with information, but the importance of fake news, there's fake news and this is how you check. But I don't see it like that. I see it really, the best taught media literacy would be as probably a study of human psychology, because all the heuristics of human decision making, our laziness, our instinct to join the herd, our instinct to sort of demonize other people with different views, our need to ever find a kind of synthesis between two opposing arguments. It needs to be based on long, careful, detailed discussion. You need to know the person you're talking with, and all of those basic human behavioral traits that we've studied quite a lot now. They're what's driving a lot of it. But social media has industrialized it, done it at an industrial level with super powerful computers. And we haven't adjusted our behavior yet. If we are still pattern spotting primates who seek out corroborating information that we already believe based on our underlying views of the world, and we're quite lazy, social media has just done that at a phenomenal scale and speed, monetized it, industrialized it, turned it into a massive advertising industry, and we're just sort of struggling to keep up. So you can never fully blame the technology for that, because it is playing on human instincts, but it's just sort of turned it at a scale and speed that's meant our education system can't keep up, our policing systems can't keep up, our own intellects can't keep up. And, think of what a change it is. When people just say technology is neutral, they're sort of missing we are drowning in information. You have to become a heuristic, fast decision maker just to stay sane. But the result is you don't really know what's going on. And so, and so you just go on Twitter and be like, those people are idiots. And these people are brilliant. And I'm on that team. So it's sport.
And that takes us beautifully into the world of crypto. And so the dynamics of cryptocurrency, which again, I look at it and I can make that argument that says, well, actually, there are some flaws with the existing ways of doing things. Yeah. And so traditional currencies do have their limitations. And so there's room for innovation in that space.
And the money printers just going non-stop at the moment, isn't it? Just keep printing money all the time. Which is, there's big problems with that, as we're gonna find out.
But so there's something really tempting about it. So when you get something like Bitcoin coming along, the blockchain technology, there's a very compelling standalone case that says this is a good thing. And so exploring that space, But very rapidly, it's taken on exactly some of the other attributes that you've talked about before in terms of playing to some of our human proclivities.
But Bitcoin, you actually, you're totally right. I mean, Bitcoin turned up in very early 2009, and it was kind of in response to the bank bailouts, which a lot of people thought were really unfair, which a lot of people thought ordinary people were going to pay the cost. But the banks, who are in some ways responsible for this, because all this margin loans and stuff they did, they're just getting bailed out by the taxpayer. How is that fair? Money being set by bankers and central banks and ultimately by politicians is not a good way of running a monetary system. It's a pretty simple, and technology provides the opportunity to create a global financial system that operates outside of governments and central banks. And the big like amazing innovation behind it, and I really do think it's one of the most interesting innovations for a long time, is trying to reintroduce a sort of form of digital scarcity. Like, can you create a system? Because that's really what Bitcoin is all about. You have 21 million Bitcoins, and because the way that it's programmed, you can't create more of them. You can't produce them quicker than they're being produced. And if everyone agrees they're worth something because of that, then they become worth something. And digital scarcity as a concept is fascinating because think of how many of your things that you own or care about, your music collection and your book collection and the photographs, are digital. And the idea that there may be some interesting innovation in creating a scarcity around those items is something that we probably haven't really worked out what it means in the long run. We could be having this conversation in 1999 about the height of the dot-com bubble. Like, fascinating technology being sort of overrun by scammers, wildly inflated valuations, but the technology behind it is probably really important. And it took 8-10 years before it kind of recovered, and we saw what the dot-com bubble was all about and e-commerce and how important it would be. Probably the same sort of thing going on here. Every time you get an exciting, fascinating new technology, the first people that design it are like the genius programmers, and the second people are the scam artists who turn up and they're like, I wonder if ordinary people might get sucked into the hype of this. And how can I, so yeah, there's a lot going on with cryptocurrencies at the moment in terms of the human psychology. And yeah, I guess that's probably why I got into it, really. The same thing. I just thought it was fascinating, but I could also see how it's going to be misused.
And in terms of misuse, it doesn't get much bigger than the story that you've spent years chasing. So for people that haven't heard of her, can you give us a quick intro to Dr. Ruja?
Dr. Ruja Ignatova, certainly can. I'll tell you the best way of explaining her is what she did. 2014, she comes out of nowhere, Bulgarian-German wunderkind, brilliant businesswoman, Oxford educated, PhD in law, 5 years at McKinsey's, legitimate person. And she says, 2014, now listen, everybody, you've all missed out on Bitcoin. I love Bitcoin. It's fascinating. I come from the world of finance and banking. I get it. It's going to change the world. But Bitcoin is already too late. It's too techy. It's too nerdy. You've missed the boat. It's too expensive for you. I've got a new one. It's better than Bitcoin. It's faster. It's smoother. It's simpler. It's designed for ordinary people, not the nerds who do all the Bitcoin stuff. Invest now, early days, and your life is going to change. You're going to get rich, and you're going to be part of the global financial revolution. This thing spreads like wildfire. So 18 months later, it's reached 175 countries. 2 to 3 billion euros has been invested by close to 1 million people. And then in October 2017, she boards a Ryanair flight from Sofia, Bulgaria to Athens, Greece, and disappears into thin air. Is never seen again. Billions of euros of people's money has gone, and she vanishes. And the whole thing is, as you can probably guess, is a gigantic pyramid Ponzi scheme with a fake cryptocurrency as the product. And the reason it spread so quickly, and it might be relevant sort of decision making, is do you remember, did you ever know anyone that was an Avon lady or a Tupperware?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, my mum did. I remember my mum did Avon parties. So, and I really loved the little bottles that the little samplers. Now that is called multi-level marketing. It's a legit. It's controversial. It's a legal form of selling, and it's basically where you buy stock, vitamins and shampoos or whatever. It doesn't really matter what it is, coffee, and then you sell some to your friends and family or anyone you can find on the street. It's usually friends and family, and you take a little commission of the sales. And then you ask them to sell to their friends and family, and they get a commission. But you, the recruiter above them, you get a tiny commission. And this can go on for layers and layers and layers and layers. Now, what Ruja's genius was to combine the hype of crypto, like you've got this amazing new technologies can change the world, global financial revolution, with a multi-level marketing sales system. So rather than selling coffee or having your garage filled up with vitamins, she said, you're not selling boxes of shampoo. You're selling the financial future. You're selling something that's going to go up in value. Tupperware doesn't go up in value a year after you've bought it. But this is OneCoin. You're buying it and selling it. It's going to go up in value too. So like it's a win-win. So this is why it spread so fast, because it was sold through that genius model of multi-level marketing. But the whole thing was fake. The price she claimed it was at was fake. Her blockchain technology behind it was not what she said it was. Just like the auditing company that was doing the audits of her blockchain was fake. The marketplace she set up was fake. Everything was fake, apart from all the billions that were lost.
It fascinates me because on the one hand, it's untested tech, right? Which is the scam. On the other hand, it's very, very tested human tech, right? She's plugged into something that has been tried, that plays back to all the things we talked about before, plays into those human dynamics. Yeah, easy way to make money. You can make money while you're sleeping. So it's tapping into that basic human psyche, as you say, of things that seem attractive, almost the extent of, sort of a little bit too, it seems almost too good to be true.
It does seem too good to be true. And this is one of the things I've really finally understood about how could so many people buy into this. Over the dinner table, possible OneCoin investors would talk to each other, and their parents would say, if it sounds too good to be, listen, sunshine, if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is too good to be true. And their answer would always be, yeah, but I read about this guy who invested $1 in Bitcoin in 2010, and it's now worth $500. And if I'd have listened to your stupid advice, I would. Yeah. Like if I'd ignored you in 2010, I'd be a millionaire by now. So I'm sorry. I've read all these articles about Bitcoin. The line's always going up. I'm seeing my mate Dave down the road, who's an idiot. He's driving a Lamborghini. So the "it sounds too good to be true" argument sort of didn't work here because Bitcoin's valuation was going up so fast that it sort of it blinded people. The single biggest driving human behavior in all of this, I think, was the simple fear of missing out. And I know it sounds very obvious, but I've spent so long trying to work out why. It's FOMO. It was the idea that this revolutionary technology had turned up, and you didn't have to be smart. You didn't have to do your careful business your business analysis, or you carefully analyzing stock prices over the years, or you just had to be in early. Like that was the trick. Get in quick before the rest of the world wakes up. And then you're in before them, you're going to make money. And it's almost like a lot of investment is like that. It's all about speed, getting a tip. I mean, the reality is, frankly, and I can tell this to anyone, if you're hearing about this, you're not in early. I'm sorry to say, you might think you are. If your mate's telling you about it, you're not early. That's the truth of it. So the fear of missing out just meant that all the normal checks and balances on these amazing investment opportunities, and that seemed to just override it all. People were terrified. And there was a sense of injustice. I think when they looked around and saw these ordinary people making millions on Bitcoin, they felt, but I'm as smart as you. I work as hard as you. I'm a good person. I don't understand. It's unfair that you've made this money and I haven't. So it there was a weird unfairness to this that I think drove people into it. And the other thing, of course, was no one really understood the tech. No one buying OneCoin understood the tech, but most people buying Bitcoin didn't understand the tech either. They just read the articles saying it's the future of money. It's exciting. And also, Dr. Ruja's pitch was also that the banking system is broken, that they're ripping you off. They can print as much money, they can just lend money to you at whatever interest rates they decide and just earn off of that. It's not fair. So the underlying message she's putting out, banks are kind of broken, interest rates are a scam, appealed to people. This is the future of money. Everyone had read that about Bitcoin, and you need to get in early. And they've seen that with Bitcoin. And those things meant like, who cares about the tech? I don't know. I don't know how it works. I don't care. All I know is I agree with all of that.
Wow. As you say, it's the FOMO bit there is you're not missing out on small gains. You're missing out on life-changing stuff.
It was all about that. Yeah.
And hence this plays into lots of territories where people have less. And so Africa would be a good example. People want to play catch up. So part of the dynamic there is, I guess, the size of it means it's almost like you should be more suspicious because the gains are larger, but actually that makes it more appealing.
Exactly. Nobody wanted to just double their money. Nobody wanted to get what Warren Buffett would consider an amazing return of 10 or 15%, because if I've got £1,000, what's 15% a year going to do for me? It's not going to change my life. If you're a multi-millionaire, 15% is incredible. But frankly, I'm not going to get to the life I want. And I think a lot of people and where they're living in there, they want to change their lives. They want to become wealthy. They want to drive a Lamborghini. They want to go on holiday, and they see it all the time on social media. They see people, ordinary people doing this, not just with Bitcoin. They see people who just seem to be living these amazing lives that seem to be very normal, and they want a piece of it. And it's almost like even if they had a suspicion in their head that it might be too good to be true, the possibility of going 100x and actually changing your life seemed like a worthwhile bet.
In part because the embarrassment if you missed it would be great as well.
Yeah, there was this weird inverse on what are we, where do we tend to be loss averse, don't we, as humans?
Yeah.
I'm basing this on my, I read Thinking Fast and Slow 5 years ago, so now I'm an expert on human psychology. But if I remember correctly, we have a loss aversion generally, a tendency to fear loss.
Yes.
But here the loss seemed to be not my money, but the loss of missing out on transforming my life through a simple financial decision. And it was almost like that's the loss, the fear of missing out, having a stronger aversion to that. Because what I'm losing there is a transformation of my life. I'm going to buy this Lamborghini and I'm going to be happy. And I can't lose that. That's what I'll lose if I don't invest. So, yeah, I've always thought this loss aversion thing made no sense to me until I flipped it and worked out what the loss really was. It wasn't the 5,000 euros. It was the 5,000 euros of OneCoin, which Ruja said would be worth 500,000 euros one day.
And so she's just basically picked a brilliant narrative. And I say brilliant in the sense of it's very effective. And there's a sort of begrudging respect at the cleverness of that. The ethics of it clearly are shocking. But she's picked this brilliant narrative that just presses all of those buttons, I guess.
Yeah, and it arrives at the right time. I think there was a moment where OneCoin should have collapsed, and you got to get into the story to understand why, but people have started to expose it. It's like a lot of Ponzi schemes. A small number of investors were able to turn their OneCoin into euros, always enough to make others think, oh, this is legitimate. But that stopped. That is the exchange, she called it. It was an exchange site she had. That shut down. That should have been the moment people were like, no, this is over. But then that was the exact moment that the price of Bitcoin went through the roof. And so people just carried on investing. But the thing is, in a way, it was the salespeople who were the best, and not just Ruja. Ruja was a brilliant mind. But the people that really turned this into something gigantic were the multi-level marketing sellers, the people that would get on stage and sell the coin to their friends and family, who'd sell it to their friends and family. And those guys are like, I think of multi-level marketers as the purest form of salespeople, because one week they're selling coffee, the next it's vitamins, and then it's cryptocurrency. They don't really care what it is. They are selling you a change of life, a transformation, financial freedom, and they are the ones that really honed the message that this wasn't about crypto. This was about a dream. This was about your life being transformed. And that narrative, when times are tough, that really taps into something deep.
Talk a little bit about how does this land in your lap, this story? Because you picked it and ran with it, but how did it come to you, and what was it about it that grabbed your attention?
There were a couple of things. The actual way it landed with me was that the BBC producer, Georgia Cat, who people will hear on the podcast a lot, she was at a dinner party and one of her friends tried to sell her this, tried to recruit her. Because the problem with multi-level marketing, every single lunchtime seminar, dinner party, coffee is an opportunity to sell. It's a horrible thing because it forces you to sell to your friends and family all the time, which also meant that people didn't want to accept it was a scam, because if they accepted it was a scam, they'd have to accept they had scammed their best friends and their uncles and brothers and stuff. So everyone was like weirdly complicit because they couldn't admit to themselves that they had, not only had they lost their money, they'd lost the money of their friends and family, which is worse. So this sort of complicity of silence, like, I just got to carry on. I don't know what else to do. It's horrible. And it keeps you tied in. So he tried to recruit her, and she looked into it, not to buy it, but just thought it sounded interesting, and realized that the founder had gone on the run and that it seemed to be not like the other cryptocurrencies because it was like a multi-level marketing company, not just a crypto. And the people talking on stage just didn't seem to know what they were talking about. And yet it seemed, and yet there was like arenas full of 10,000 cheering fans going wild. She was like, this is bizarre. She calls me up and says, I've seen you've done some, you did a TED talk about how to buy drugs on the darknet using Bitcoin. You seem to be interested in this area. Do you want to come and work with me on it? And then so off we went. But we then, and I think the BBC as well, were really, you're always looking for a story that about technology the technology is like the underlying thing, but there's something more exciting going on. If I were to just do a story about Bitcoin scam because of market manipulation, it will be quite boring and people will switch off and they won't get to the truth of it. But this story had a pursuit. It had a missing woman that we were trying to hunt down and find. And so we knew it was a really good way of doing a series where it would be exciting and dramatic. Where is she? We're getting a lead, we're getting a tip off. But through that, we're telling you how money laundering works, how blockchain technology works, how multi-level marketing works, and how company formation works, and how a scam really operates in its entirety. So it just seemed like a really unique combination of a missing person and crypto. And we just wanted to use it to explain to people how crypto worked, because it's a really hard thing to do, but we sort of know that it's getting bigger and bigger, and you need to find ways for ordinary people. But the thing we're terrified about was that an ordinary listener would be like, oh, it's this thing about crypto. I'm not into that. I don't want to listen. So we had to make it like the missing crypto grid, the woman, she's on the run. We're going to find her. It's like, oh, well, listen to that.
Right.
It's exciting. So there was this sense that it was a really unique story. But the final thing we found very unusual was that it wasn't really covered much. It wasn't really being written about in many places. And I think it's because the crypto press, who knew about it, and they sort of thought, they looked at it and were like, this is a pyramid scheme. This is a multi-level, it's nothing to do with us. But the mainstream press looked at it and thought, oh, it's a crypto story. It's probably one for the crypto specialists. And it kind of fell between the two. So there were times when we were looking at each other being like, is this for real? I mean, is really no one writing about this multi-billion-dollar scam with a missing woman? Have we got it completely wrong? But then we'd see the videos of 10,000 screaming fans, and we'd talk to people who'd lost every single penny they'd had, and so had their cousin and their sister and their brother. And you're like, oh my God, this thing is huge, isn't it? It's everywhere.
And so you begin this fascinating voyage of discovery, and you use words like trail when you talk about it, right?
Yeah.
For obvious reasons, because you are detectives
Yeah.
trying to find,
Yeah.
and you're chasing her around the planet. It must have been a fascinating journalistic endeavor because you're simultaneously unpicking what the hell happened.
Yeah.
And there's the live case of, well, where the hell is she?
Yeah. The trick was to try to combine the two, I suppose. To be honest with you, like, trying to find someone that doesn't want to be found is a whole different type of journalism, isn't it? It's not one that I'm really used to doing. I write about technology, but it's like, I don't know how to find someone who's in hiding. But then you sort of learn all the different techniques and kind of coming at it, not knowing that much about that style of journalism. It's not even journalism, like private detective work. It's quite useful in a way because as you learn, you can tell the readers or the listeners, this is how it works. And I don't know either. So we're kind of in this together. We're both trying to figure it out. But the thing we really tried to do, we made a decision about this, was to do it as a live investigation. So we didn't record all 8 episodes and then put them out at once. We were recording them as they were coming out. So when we put out episode 4, we didn't know what was in episode 5. We just had to do it in a week. We had done loads of interviews beforehand, but we were trying to feed in the leads we were getting, the tip-offs we were getting and stuff like that as we went. And I really remember this. On episode 7, we're sitting there like, Georgia, we can't just tell the listeners that we think she could be here or she could be here or she could be here because they're just not going to be happy with that. And by this point, it was #1 in the iTunes charts and we're getting messages every 5 minutes like, when's the next episode coming out? We're so excited. I hope you find her. And he's like, this was like, oh my God, they're going to be so disappointed. We start going through all of our different leads and stuff. Almost 3 days before you hear episode 7, where we go to Frankfurt, we decided to fly there on like Monday, and the podcast episode about it came out on Wednesday or Thursday. So it really was to the wire. And I think people quite liked the fact we were literally like, it was, I got someone the other day, I was doing an event about it, and they said, you know what I really liked about it? It's just how unpolished it was. I was like, yeah, thanks, I guess. But,
There was a real sense of, I think, take this the right way, kind of like Famous Five or Secret Seven. You're sort of, investigate as you go, and there was a charm to it because the bit that's astonishing is I would like to believe that the authorities would have the capability, they'd have access to a load more stuff
Yeah.
and would go about it in possibly a slightly different way. But you were back to some amateur detective sleuthing that's really engaging because we can also go, well, what would I be doing in these situations? And I found myself following you to go, oh, I wouldn't have thought of doing that. Or that's interesting. Or that's exciting. And so going alongside you, not being a professional police officer, I think has a sort of charm to it because I can understand the challenges you're facing in a way that I wouldn't if you had access to the full sort of machinery of the law.
Yeah, that's the thing about making podcasts. And podcasts are now big business, aren't they? Everyone's doing, I don't mean like interviews.
Yeah, everyone's doing that.
Every idiot's got a podcast now. I didn't mean it like that. I actually meant the true crime genre podcast, this kind of investigation podcast. And I think the style now is really like, show us how you're doing it. Show us how you're working it out. Show us your mistakes. And it offers you the chance to do that. It's a bit more personal. Some people have said it's because you're listening on headsets, so you're really like in their heads. You're right there. You feel so close to it. And you want to feel the person make mistakes and get it wrong and learn as you go, and that you can learn too. I know from talking to people at the BBC generally, this kind of the BBC authority talking down to you about this is the story and I'm going to tell you. And this is what it is, and listen to me. But it's not in vogue. It's not fashionable anymore. And this kind of more honest, open approach to how you do it and the mistakes you make is more popular. And we definitely wanted to like fully embrace that. It does have challenges because there are really simple things about, I don't want to get into the technicalities of making a podcast, but sometimes a big breakthrough is literally someone sends you an email. It's not like I'm on the ground chasing someone down the street. It's like, bing, I've got an email, and it changes the story. It's like, how do you make that dramatic? How do you, but that's how investigations are. So there's a few tricks that you try to do to make it compelling. It's got to be a story and everything. But I really enjoyed it. I really appreciated being allowed to be imperfect, I suppose. It's quite different though to when you write the book, because people aren't forgiving in that way. They need to know the details. Quite often me and Georgie would ask a question, whack on a bit of music, leave it hanging, and everyone's like, great. Whereas with a book, people expect it to be totally comprehensive. So it was quite a challenge to move from one to the other. They're quite different projects.
And logically, the book gives you room. It's a simple fact of you have much more space to be able to tell the story.
Yeah, but that's also a curse because, like I said, with the podcast, you can focus in on the things that are really exciting and the things you know, and kind of ignore a bit the things you don't. You with less space.
You shine the spotlight where it makes sense to shine it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm afraid when you've got 70,000 words, you can't just leave loads of blank pages to, like,
Right.
be continued and all that stuff that we do. I want to know, like, who her work colleagues were and what they thought of her. It's like, oh my God, it's going to figure that out. So, it's a really different somehow. And you'd be surprised how much you can
Right.
cover with music. You can make boring things sound good if you put a bit of music under it. In a book, you're really screwed. You can't do that. Maybe have like like wine pairings. I should have music.
I guess you could with the audio
pairings for
book, right?
with chapters.
Right. And then
Yeah.
and so I'm fascinated by what this process does to you.
Are you fascinated, or is that a question you just ask people when you...
No, genuinely, because I imagine it's all consuming. Unlike a sort of other job, you could kind of shut off from it. As you're investigating, things will be coming in, pieces of information won't come in neatly when you're
Yeah.
sat, waiting for them.
Yeah.
They'll arrive at whatever point. I presume you're
Yeah.
thinking about this all the
Yeah.
time. You're scouring, as you're reading stories of things, maybe you're thinking, well, is there a link here? So this must be like hugely sort of all consuming for you.
Yeah, it has to be, I think. It has to be with these kinds of things. I'm sure you heard this before, but you become completely obsessed. And one of the problems, dreaming about it, I'm really obsessed.
I was going to say, you're getting like visions of her following you. And stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, completely. Well, there's a couple of things about that. One is you become completely obsessed. You kind of have to. But you've got to every now and again step back and think the ordinary reader does not care about this tiny detail you're obsessed with. You've got to remember that not everyone's going to be like you and into this story in the same way. You've got to be conscious of that. But the other thing is you get so paranoid. I've got to be honest, I hated writing this book. I love the story. I'm obsessed with it. And I think it's one of probably the most incredible story I'll ever work on. But the act of putting it together can be really painful. You're terrified you're going to get something wrong and you're going to be exposed as having made a big mistake. And that's a scary thing given who's involved. But you get so paranoid about, like, you get followed around in the streets and people are going to find out where you live, and investors or promoters or other powerful people involved are going to like find you and ruin your life. And I don't think people sometimes realize that with investigative work like this, the level of paranoia. I would be walking around in my front room with my girlfriend, like literally until a few days ago, and like, why have I done this to myself? Why am I even doing this? I should just go and move to Devon and open a cafe because I'm not enjoying my life. I'm so stressed, I'm nervous, I'm paranoid. The weirdest thing was as well, the day the podcast first came out, 4 o'clock in the morning, someone starts hammering on my window saying, "Get the F out, get out of here." Like, and I was like, oh my God, what the hell's going on? And I wandered over and they say, he's banging on the door, open up, open up. And I phoned the police, I phoned 999. And I was like, hi, I released a podcast this morning.
I'm a podcaster. Get me out of here.
And there's someone banging on my door. Because I thought like the mafia had come to get me. And it was, I can't believe someone at the wrong house. I'm like, what do you want?
But what are the chances of that?
I'm just looking for something. Can you believe that? I swear to God, the day it came, I'm not lying. I'm not doing one of those things like on the way here in the taxi. I swear that happened. I couldn't believe it. But that paranoia is real. Like, you might be paranoid, but it's affecting your life. You are nervous, you are worried. And so it takes over your life and you become obsessed with it, not just because you love the story and you're into it and you want the details and you're excited, it's thrilling. But the flip side, you're scared, you're worried, you're nervous. And so we were always really, really wanted the podcast to be a big success because we always thought the
Right.
bigger it is, the safer we are. Because we're not going to be, these people are business people. They're not stupid. They don't cause trouble for themselves. If you've done a massive, big podcast hit, it doesn't make sense for them to start causing you problems, basically, because it's going to cause them problems.
Yeah.
But if you're tiny nobody, they will. So we were like, please let this be a successful podcast. It mattered more. Yeah, everyone's promoting their work, but I don't think people realized it really did matter to us that people listen.
There is obviously a main protagonist to the story, clearly Dr. Ruja. What's your sort of view on her as an individual? Would you be intrigued to meet her?
To me, it would be like meeting a celebrity. I'd be quite nervous. I would love to be able to spend an hour talking to her because I feel like I know her so well, but also there's so much I still don't know about her as a person. I would love to meet her, of course. I wouldn't know what to say almost. I'd be falling over my words, you know. But the other thing is that for a while now, I've sort of realized that I am a proxy for other people. So I said about how nervous and paranoid I am, but I couldn't stop because I felt there were so many people, either people that had invested, who felt like we were trying finally to get to the truth and get them a little bit of justice somehow, or at least acknowledgement, or people that might consider investing in something similar, or just the listeners and people who were just really into the story. And I felt like they'd taken over us and I'd become just like their spokesperson almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I had to carry on, even if I didn't want to in a way. And even if I was worried, I was like, no, I've got to keep going. So I would just try to think, I'm just here talking to her for them. What do they want to know? They want to know how she feels. Does she regret it? Can she sleep at night? Did she mean it to get so big? Why did she drop her brother in it? Why did she vanish and leave everyone else to pick up the pieces? And that, what would they want to know? So that's how I would try to go into it. If I do actually see her, if she phones me up out of the blue one day.
And I mean, it's a logical presumption that she will have listened to the show.
Oh, we were told by people she not only would have listened to it, she would have loved it. Yeah, because she's got delusions of grandeur and she's extremely hubristic, arrogant, self-centered. The idea that her name is suddenly out there and people are talking about her and the world is wondering what's happened to her. She'd have loved all that. What she would hate is sitting in front of a jury at the Southern District of New York court in like prison scrubs, raking over every detail of her life and her private emails. That's what she'd hate. A big podcast stuff and all the rest of it, she would have loved it, which is a bit of a weird position to be in, I suppose, for me. Yeah.
But I guess you have to, I mean, it takes a certain type of character to go through and do this thing. And I was interested implicit in what you were saying, even if you're hubristic and you sort of have great expectations, is possibly more wildly successful than she would ever have dreamt of.
Yeah, I don't think she ever went in there thinking it would be anywhere near as big as it, not a 10th, not a 20th as big as it was. I think she went in there thinking, there may have even been moments where she fooled herself into thinking this could even be a legitimate project. But in 2014, 15, what you've got to remember is the line between the scams and the real coins was blurred. It was all quite new. There was a lot at the time where people would have what are called initial coin offerings. This is where you essentially promise what your project is going to deliver. You sell to the world that one day we're going to revolutionize web server space using blockchain. You can get the coins early, the tokens early for very cheap. And one day we think it's going to be worth a lot of money. People pour all the money in and you never deliver on any of it. The price goes nowhere. The founders have got all the money. And it's like, it's a scam, but they'll say it's high risk investment. Like a lot.
And we genuinely intended to deliver on this, but
we intended to, but for various reasons, it was harder than we thought. Those prices we said were always speculative. You should have known that. Then she may have started it thinking it would be like one of those, like, get away with this for a while. We probably won't deliver, but the multi-level marketing side of this, the fact that around the world, suddenly it was being sold in tiny seminar rooms in Japan and in churches in Uganda, like, She didn't even know where it was being sold. It had gone everywhere, and she couldn't stop because it was going so big, so fast. She probably thought, "I'll figure out the deal." We've got 150 million coming in a week. I'll figure out how to fix this. But she couldn't. She just couldn't. There was no way to fix it. It's too late. So it's like classic, your own hubris sort of brings you down, isn't it? It's like Greek tragedy.
Right. And so you could say running away, for want of a better phrase, is potentially a logical solution to that. Right. I've got no way of handling this, so I just need to get out of here.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, she disappeared 2 weeks after a sealed US indictment for money laundering and fraud was not published, was written, that no one should have seen. I suspect she was given a copy of it and told about it, warned about it by some corrupt officials. And she may have thought, you know what, I'll disappear for a few weeks and I'll lay low, but this will blow over and I'll come back. I'll get the best lawyers in the world fighting this. I'll figure this out. But then it quickly became apparent that that was not going to happen. And she decided she had to stay away. But the cost of that was she left a lot of people in it. And the number one person she dropped in it, check this out, she brings her little brother in to become her PA in 2016. So he's just organizing her meeting, her flights and her hotel. He doesn't know anything about this. He's like a bodybuilder, like a gym fanatic. She becomes her PA. She disappears. He's pressured into taking over the company. Then he gets arrested in America and was facing 80 years in prison. I
Right.
mean, do that to your little brother. It's just unconscionable, isn't it? He ended up taking a plea deal with the US authorities, and he's testifying and testified already against other people that were involved in the scam, and hoping that he'll get a reduced sentence as a result. He's guilty. He, for 18 months, was working on it. He could have walked away at any moment, but he didn't. And there's a lot of reasons why he didn't. So he's not innocent, and he didn't admit he's never said he was innocent. But what she did to him, that is, so you've got the mass colossal fraud, but to do that to your brother gives also you sort of an insight into what sort of person she is.
It brings us sort of back to the start point around the human cost of this. For anybody that's caught up in this is immense.
Yes, I think that so unfortunately, when Ponzi schemes collapse, they're quite notorious that people kill themselves. They are ashamed. They're embarrassed. It's not just the money. And I know there are people that have sold their houses. They've sold their livestock. They've sold their cars. They've left their jobs. It's not just that. That's awful. That's difficult to deal with. You've also lost the life you thought you were about to lead. When you turned your investment into real money, you were going to have a Bentley. And investors would talk to each other about, what color Bentley are you getting? Well, I'm going to get a gold one. Well, I'm going to get a black one. It's also the shame. You've got to admit to people you were fooled. And you've got to tell people that you recruited, that you sold them a scam. You sold them a Ponzi scheme. And the shame of doing that is as much as the money. That's terrible. And that's why you have people that kill themselves. They can't face what they've done. And I understand I don't understand why you kill yourself. I understand the acute shame that would come with that.
And yeah, because you've done it to people
Exactly.
It's not sort of, you can't, there's no ability to distance yourself and kind of cut those people out because they are your family and friends.
And you see them suffering. You see they have lost their life saving and they're now going through financial hardship and you can't really help them. And I think that's what, that's why these kinds of investment scams, not just your classic investment scam where you put your money in and you lose it, or you're hacked into, or you click on the wrong link. You are complicit in a different way with a pyramid scheme because you've recruited people in. So it's very different. And it's the reason why people stay in for so long as well. They can't face up to that. They don't want to think it could be false. And that's why I think pyramid schemes are especially troubling, because of what they do to human relationships.
Wow. I guess we need a cheery note on which to finish. So clearly, I mean, you're obviously busy having
Do
written the
we?
book.
Why do we?
Because there's too much gloom and doom in the world. But
Oh,
I want
that's
people to have
true.
a positive sense when they think about your book,
Yeah,
because I
sorry.
think everything you're doing is amazing. So clearly, this is a major part of your life, and you're kindly spending time with people like me to have conversations like this. Obviously, you are still keeping an eye on the missing
Yeah.
crypto queen.
Yeah,
And
just a bit.
but when things calm down, and that's a huge presumption, what's next on the list of things for you to look at?
Well, I have actually been working on another type of scam story, but I can't say anything about it at all. So that won't be out for a while anyway. But for the near future, it's what people don't tell you about writing a book is that you have to go from being an author and all the things you have to do for that to becoming basically a salesperson. You know, you got to push. It's a difficult business. You got to push yourself. You got to be out there talking to everyone, doing events, and this is why it's a strange thing being a writer. And I give advice sometimes to writers and say, remember, the minute you've submitted it, you're turning into someone new. You're now a salesman, an MLM marketer, basically. You've got to start selling this thing. That's
Well,
your
you're
job
perfectly
now.
placed, though, right? Because you've been observing
I know. Yeah, I need to set up some kind of pyramid selling scheme for my book, or maybe as an NFT. That's the latest thing. So you basically then have to dedicate yourself to doing that. What's the point? Like, no one's going to read it.
Right.
So the next thing is there's going to be new episodes of the podcast, but I've got to try and sell this book to people. And I don't just mean like literally selling it. I mean the ideas behind it, getting it out there, because this was all about getting people to understand, I suppose, the risks of investing in these things, how they look, how they feel, how they work, how you know when you see one. And at the moment, with all the hype about crypto, I mean, unfortunately, the last couple, I feel like it just came out just 2 weeks too late because all this money's being lost on cryptocurrency investments at the moment. And I don't know, maybe one or two people might have read this book if it had come out a month earlier and not lost
Right.
their money. But I'm pretty confident this is cyclical. We're going to get more and more of these scams, more and more speculative investments. And I've always thought that the amounts involved are huge. There's some people that invested $250,000 in OneCoin. And if that one person just doesn't invest again, or one person who's thinking about it and reads the book and doesn't invest, I could have saved someone £250,000.
Right.
So I really feel like, I've got to get this to people. I want people to understand how it all works. And hopefully, I'll never know, but hopefully I'll get emails one day saying, you know what, I read your book and I didn't invest and it subsequently collapsed. So you saved me all this money. Then brilliant.
Wow.
Done my job.
Love it. Love it. Love it. The other thing I think, and I want to point this out to lots of listeners to this show, work in areas of compliance, so financial crime prevention being a key area. And I think this is a really good example. Often that subject is communicated in a really dry way. And it's kind of, here are the laws about these things. And so what I think you've done is you've brought to life something that has those human dynamics, that is a really interesting gateway. So I want to encourage people that are managing compliance programs, dealing with, thinking about how do I make something that I think is interesting, because I've looked at all the things you talked about, communicating with people who aren't spending their whole life looking at this and who may have a passing interest in it, or maybe no interest. How do you pique their interest and grab their attention so that they can start to think about risks that are out there? So from that perspective, I think it's incredibly powerful. And I'd recommend people read it and use it as an interesting case study. So hopefully there's a whole new area for you to sell books to, for people that are professionally interested in it, but are having to communicate to an audience that aren't.
Yeah, fingers crossed, because those people are doing extremely important work. And sometimes I think you're right. Sometimes the message isn't getting out to the right people. And sometimes they can be slightly risk averse as well. They don't want to give direct advice. The reason I think Martin Lewis, the money saving expert, is so successful is because he actually gives people practical advice. He says, do this, send this email to this company and ask them these questions. Whereas a lot of the advice is often, do your own research, figure it out for yourself, be careful. That's for busy people, ordinary people, that doesn't really help. So
Well, it's going to be useless, right? Thanks for telling me be careful, right? Because I wasn't going to be. I was going to go out and deliberately be wildly irresponsible.
So, and I think that sometimes because regulators and compliance people are also careful they don't want to say too much. They don't want to put their neck on the line. But there was definitely a lot of regulators out there with OneCoin that should have been bolder, that should have said, you know what, based on my professional judgment and experience, I can say quite definitively that is a scam. And we have a duty to warn people about this, and we're going to do it in a quite a compelling way. Otherwise, it just gets lost. And the other thing is these scammers are good. And because this is about a global financial revolution, what they tended to do every time they saw a regulator issuing some kind of warning, they would say, yeah, they're part of the establishment. They're part of the global banking elite. They're part of the system. That's the problem. They're scared of this financial revolution. So they could dismiss those concerns or those regulator warnings. And so regulators have got to come up with a way of talking about this where, it's going to get round that. It's going to get round that narrative of them being part of the problem.
Love it. Jamie, I could keep talking to you forever. Thank you so much for, the work that you've done. The podcast is awesome. It was one of those ones where I think I started listening when I was walking around a supermarket and always dropped something on the floor, even knowing where the subject was going. So the book's fabulous. Keep up the work that you're doing, because I think you fulfill a really, really important role. And thank you for being so dedicated to the task, but also super engaging, both as a writer, a podcaster, and as a guest on the show.
Thanks very much for having me. We're going to get the word out. We're going to keep pushing. Don't you worry about that. So it's been a pleasure. See you again. See you again soon, maybe with an update.
Thank you so much. So that's it for this episode of the Human Risk Podcast. My enormous thanks to Jamie for appearing and to you for listening. To find out more about the Missing Cryptoqueen podcast and book, have a look in the show notes. There are links to both of those there. If this is your first time listening to the Human Risk Podcast, welcome. You can subscribe wherever you get your quality audio content. It's available on all of the major podcasting platforms. If you like the show and have yet to leave a 5-star review for it, please do so. It really does help other people to find the show. To find out more about human risk and the work that I do with my clients, to subscribe to the Human Risk newsletter, and to learn about tricks that you can deploy to manage human risk in your organization, visit human-risk.com. I'll be back very soon with another episode of this show, but in the meantime, stay safe, look out for scams, and thanks for listening.